You can create anything you want by using the power of your imagination, and circumstances don't matter whatsoever. If you want something, if you want to create something, whether that's a new house, a new career, being in a different location, or even helping or assisting someone in your life that is in a troubled situation, you can do that with the power of your imagination. And that's what this testimonial is about. We're going to get into today from The Power of Awareness by Neville Goddard. This is actually someone that Neville Goddard was consulting with, teaching her how to use the power of imagination, or the law of assumption. And she came into contact with someone in her life, a family member, that was in distress. So she wanted to help her. So she taught someone else what she learned from Neville Goddard. So let's go ahead and jump right into this. This is case number 4 from The Power of Awareness by Neville Goddard. This was told by the aunt in the story to the entire audience at the conclusion of one of my lectures. During the question period following my lecture on the law of assumption, a lady who had attended my lectures and had personal consultations with me on a number of occasions. She rose and asked permission to tell a story illustrating how she had successfully used the law of assumption, or the power of imagination. She said that upon returning home from the lectures and from the coaching and the consultations she had with Neville Goddard, she had found her niece distressed and terribly upset. The husband of the niece, who was an officer in the Army Air Force stationed in Atlantic City, had just been ordered, along with the rest of his unit, to active duty in Europe. She tearfully told her aunt that the reason she was upset was that she had been hoping her husband would be assigned to Florida as an instructor. They both loved Florida and were anxious to be stationed there and not to be separated. Upon hearing the story, the aunt stated that there was only one thing to do, and that was to apply immediately the law of assumption, or your power of your imagination. So she said, let's actualize it. So she's giving examples. She's teaching her niece what she learned from Neville Goddard and his lectures and the consultations, that the power of your imagination, you can create anything, and that circumstances don't matter. So she says, let's create this. Let's actualize this. She said, if you were actually in Florida, so she's giving this demonstration. She's talking to her niece saying, if you were in Florida right now, if you were actually in Florida, what would you do? That's the question. You're asking questions to the subconscious mind, and then you're creating a new feeling state, basically, is what this does. It creates a new feeling state. Like I do in a lot of my meditations, I'll ask questions, which will create a new feeling state within you and actually expand your imagination to think out of the box and to create a new feeling state presently. Okay, so she said, what would you do? You would feel the warm breeze. So so she's creating the scene in her mind. She's asking these questions, and then she's creating the warm breeze. So she's bringing in a sense. Okay, so the feeling, she's feeling the breeze. She's feeling the breeze, and you would smell the salt in the air. So you're smelling and tasting the salt in the air. And so you're bringing those senses, your taste, your smell, and you're feeling the breeze, the warm breeze. You would feel your toes sinking down into the sand. So she's feeling the sand with her feet now. Well, let's do it all right now, she says. Let's do this. Let's create the scene presently that you are now in Florida. Because if she's now in Florida, that would mean that her husband would have to been stationed or moved as an instructor in Florida, as if the way that she wanted it to happen. So she's creating this new scene in her mind. She's visualizing it in her mind, asking these questions, making a scene real to her by thinking from it, by creating the senses. Because when you create the senses in the scene, like the smelling, the tasting, the feeling, and all of these things inside the scene, then you're making it real to you. And when you make something real, then it has to take place in your 3D world. All right, so let's continue here. Okay, so they took off their shoes and they turned out the lights, and then in imagination, they felt themselves actually in Florida, feeling the warm breeze, smelling the sea air, pushing their toes into the sand. These things are creating the realness of the imaginal act. And this is why it's very important to do this, to bring your senses in, your smelling, your tasting, your feeling, the sand, things that would imply that you're now in this location that you want to be in. She wants to be in Florida. She wants her husband to be stationed in Florida as an instructor. So if she was now in Florida, that would imply these things would have to take place. So she goes through this in her imagination very simply. So it appears that they only actually do this one time. They actually only do this together one time. They create this scene in imagination, and within 48 hours, within 2 days, the husband received a change of orders. His new instructions were to report immediately to Florida as an Air Force instructor. 5 days later, his wife was on a train to join him. So even though the aunt was actually performing the imaginal act with her niece, she didn't actually join in and go to Florida with her because she was just teaching her. She wasn't actually in the scene. She was just teaching her niece how to use the power of assumption and actually just walking it through with her, not actually feeling the things, just kind of training her niece on how to do it. And that's why I believe that her aunt didn't actually go to Florida with her. It was just the niece, because the niece was actually in it and she was actually had that burning desire to create the scene like vividly real. But the aunt wasn't really desirous in going to Florida. So that's what she lacked. That's why she didn't join the niece in actually going to Florida with her. She was just pretty much training her. And that's what I believe happened here. Because in assuming the state of conscience requires she did not go to Florida, that was not her desire. On the other hand, that was the intense longing desire of the niece. So basically, they did this one time together. They imagined this scene one time. It doesn't say how long, but it was, if I had to guess, it was probably only 10, 20, maybe 30 minutes they did this together one time. And within 2 days or 48 hours, it actually happened. They actually had a shift in their reality, which changed absolutely everything. And I love this story because it demonstrates how easily you can use the power of imagination, even doing it one time, and bringing your senses in and visualizing in your mind's eye, in your imagination, and putting, because I also feel that the sand from the beach, that the feeling of your toes in the sand is a real feeling. And if you can actually attain that feeling, that would imply that something is actually happening right now. And that's a very powerful sense to bring in. And smelling the salt in the air, tasting the salt in the air, and all these things that they did with this imagined state made it so real that they actually shifted realities, like the parallel realities. That she shifted to a world where her husband was now going to be stationed in Florida because she's now in Florida. So everything had to correspond or be congruent with that feeling state that she impressed with her imagination and creating that. And I think this story is really powerful because it shows how much power you have with your imagination and how you can do this one time and make it real and have something happen within a couple days, 48 hours, 2 days, and within 5 days, she's in Florida. And her husband gets new orders within 48 days. And when you create this scene like she did, I would imagine that after the first time, she landed it because she was detached from the outcome. Because once you feel something to be real, as if it's already happened, you're no longer attached to it because it's already happened. She's living in that state, and then she went to sleep in that state. She fell asleep with the state of now being in Florida, or as if it was already completed. That version of herself, that concept of herself now was now in Florida, and she was in that present being of being in Florida. And that's why this happened and was created, letting it go and detaching from the outcome, from feeling that it already happened. Feeling something to be already happened, that creates the letting go. It creates the detachment from it because you now have the thing. You're no longer wanting it. You're no longer desiring it. That desire was eliminated. That she had no more desire to be in Florida because she already was in Florida. So that's that detachment which allowed everything to come into place and change circumstances, for that to happen in her life. All right, guys, that is the end of this video, and I will be getting into case history number 5 very shortly, which is a very powerful testimonial. And leave me any comments or anything you want to leave in the comment box below. Leave that, share anything that's on your mind, because I read all of those, and a lot of times I get a lot of ideas from those because we're all connected. Ideas for future content that I will be creating for you because I read all of those. And be aware of the scammers that impersonate me within the comments. So if somebody comments back or replies to your comment and you see that it has my profile picture on it or my logo on it, that is not me. If they try to tell you to contact me at a specific number or WhatsApp, that is not me. They are impersonating me, so do not respond to those. Just report those. All right, guys, I love you guys very much, and I'll see you guys in the next video.